what we're really hearing more and more about is this SQL Server reporting services. I mentioned this in the December session we did. I talked to a guy that he makes his living doing report development, business intelligence. They're a certified Crystal trainer as well as certified SQL Server reporting services trainer. And he says his Crystal classes, partly because a lot of people already know Crystal and don't need as much training, are about half full or less lately, and his SQL Server reporting services classes are jam-packed. And so he sees a trend where a lot of people are really migrating to this platform from Crystal. And we're hearing a lot about it in our algorithm exact world, but not as much as he is living in that pure BI world. Just a quick note, if you are looking at SSRS, you can run it back in SQL Server 2005. It exists back there, and it's not bad in our experience. But the newer version, there's a newer version in SQL Server 2008, and an even newer version in SQL Server 2008 R2. So if you want to get the latest and greatest with all the newest features, you want to go to that R2 platform. And you can get a free copy to run on your laptop if you want. It just doesn't allow you to do deploy reports remotely, things like that. But it gives you a chance to play with that interface. It is quote-unquote free with SQL Server, and that's one of the big advantages that some people see over Crystal, that you don't have to pay for it, especially those of you that are looking at it like a deployment model where if you skip down to the fourth bullet there, the built-in deployment controls, where you have to buy Crystal Server if you're on the Crystal platform, or there are third-party tools that allow you to do similar types of deployment control as far as rolling those reports out to your users and providing security. With SSRS, that's all built in, and so that's a nice advantage that they have over the Crystal environment. It's built in there. It also has more than one development environment. What I mean by that is, and if we have time here in a second, I'll show you, you actually do your main report development inside Microsoft Development Studio. However, there is a more Microsoft Office type report builder tool that you can allow some of your less technical users to use to build some reports for themselves. And again, that could be a whole day-long class in itself, what that means. But there are some options there as far as what kind of interface you use as maybe an advanced report developer or your IT staff uses versus what you might allow maybe a power user to use. So there's some flexibility there. As I've been mentioning throughout this section, growing presence in the marketplace. We see more and more folks doing it. I was at a customer up near Cleveland last month and saw some really nice reports that they had put together. And then the nice thing for some people, again, Crystal does a great job of creating a report that was really intended to be printed out. I mean, a lot of us look at them in PDF or right on the screen now, but it's really, it's designed around a piece of paper if you look at it, versus what you'll notice as you look at SSRS reports is it's more sort of a web screen looking result when you run your report. You can print them out, but I think they're really better suited to the more online viewing that we see more typically now. And that goes back to that point with the Synergy Enterprise application, where you can embed those right in a web application like Synergy or others, and they look right at home right there in that browser interface. And the last point on the SSRS is that, as I've been mentioning, it's integrated to Synergy Enterprise, but those of you running the newer versions of Macola ES, Exact is rolling out more and more reports in the SSRS interface. So some of you at the bottom of I think it's at the bottom right of some of your report screens, will see a button. It'll say Crystal, and then one will say SQL Server report. And what they've done is they're slowly redeveloping the reports. The Crystal versions are still there, but they're slowly redeveloping the reports in SSRS and giving you the option. They still have not said, we've been trying to find out for a while if that's if they're going to dump Crystal eventually. They have not said that, but you can see from the screens that they are sticking their toe in that water. So we're staying in touch with them on that, but that's the information we have right now. Okay, this is my local install of Microsoft Visual Studio, and when you install SQL Server, I've got SQL Server 2008 R2 running on my laptop, and when you install the reporting components of that, this gets installed automatically. But for those of you that are developers or work with developers, it's basically the same interface that they use to write other kinds of applications. But in this case, I'm going to use it to show you some of the reports. And it's comparing this to a Crystal interface, it's definitely more complex, and it looks a lot different. Here I've got what are called data sources. So again, comparing this to Crystal, when I come into Crystal, it asks me to connect to a database and things like that. And it's got its own interface for that. Some people are very comfortable with it. Other people are less so, depending on where you come from as far as, if you're familiar with SQL or not. For me, I'm more of a SQL-oriented person, and I really like the ability in SSRS to have multiple data sources set up, as well as you look right here, shared data sources. So I can set up data sources that are shared across multiple reports, multiple projects, things like that fairly easily. Again, I know Crystal has some of the same capability, and some of that's in standard Crystal, some of it's in Crystal Server. This is what it looks like in SSRS. I'm not saying Crystal's bad and this is good. It's just different, I guess. So I have my data sources, and then I create what are called data sets, and those are basically queries that go look at my data. So here you can see I've done a data set. I've created a query that's going and looking at a table in my probably my Synergy or my Macola ES database. This is a SIMPY table for those of you that are familiar with it. And so here I've said, okay, these are all the fields that I'm going to have available to me. So sort of like my Field Explorer in Crystal. And then I've set up, and this is called a Tablix. It's sort of a combination of a tabbed report or a cross-tab report, as well as a pivot report you can have in here as well pretty easily. I've got my row groupings down here at the bottom. I can have column groupings down here, and I drop my fields in there, and it allows me to run the report. So here it's not a very pretty report, but you can see I've got it grouped by state. Here's my customer number, basically, and then my customer name, and I preview it. And just to my point earlier about the look and feel of this is kind of the standard look and feel. You can modify this, obviously, but it's a standard look and feel that SSRS gives you versus what Crystal gives you. And to me, this looks more like something that would be on a web page or a screen versus a piece of paper. So you can do all kinds of different kinds of analysis here. If I go to my toolbox, I've got all kinds of charts. I'll bring up the gauge. Oops, that's the preview. I'll go back to design mode. Drop a gauge in there. So I could say I want to see this gauge or that chart or any of those things and drop those in there. So I can use this just like I can in Crystal and some of the other tools to build what is basically a dashboard for myself, and I can relate the different objects on the screen together, things like that. And then when it comes time to, obviously I can test it right here with that preview tab I was showing you, but when it comes time to deploy it, I have this build feature right here. And I can build and deploy that report out to what's called a reporting server. And I'm not going to lead you through that, but again, it comes with the system. You can set up this website basically and give people a hyperlink to it that allows them to come in and view their reports that you've set up for them to be able to look at. So I'm managing them here on the back end. I'm testing them. Then when I want to deploy them, I just do it via these features, and it obviously checks them for errors and issues and things like that. And then I roll them out that way and allow my users to have access to them that way with all kinds of security considerations, things like that built in on the front end side. So I just wanted to give you a glance at the interface. Again, when I first came into this interface versus Crystal, I was pretty intimidated because there's so many different things going on. It can get pretty busy, but once you get used to it and get a little bit of training on it, I found it to be rather powerful, a little bit easier for people that are used to working with SQL queries, things like that, to do what you want to do, and just pretty user-friendly as far as the deployment and the rollout and the security, things like that. So just one person's opinion, but I wanted to give you a glance in case you hadn't seen that before.